So my next question is to Ms. Patel. Ms. Patel, the Brennan Center recently released a critical report on the Department of Homeland Security, pointing to numerous alleged failures to protect privacy and civil liberties as part of its efforts to combat international terrorism. You also identify a number of reforms to DHS, particularly with how its Office of Intelligence and Analysis operates and to its internal oversight offices, the Privacy Office, Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, and the Office of the Inspector General. Can you please talk to the board a little bit on what precisely you would like to see with those changes?
On INA in particular?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think I'm sure the board is pretty aware of what's been going on with INA, and there have been several critical reports from the General Counsel's office at DHS, as well as from the IG's office. I think that the kinds of things that we are interested in terms of INA is, better rules, basically. There seem to be a lot of rules that are kind of informal, easily changed, et cetera. And the intelligence that INA produces often veers into First Amendment protected territory. And we saw that pretty clearly in the context of Portland, for example. In addition, I think we would like to see, so sort of related to that, so better rules for INA itself, because the reports that have come out, the internal examinations, suggest that there is very little understanding within INA analysts about the kinds of parameters that they're supposed to be following. So some additional training, and I believe DHS has also started down this path. We think there needs to be greater sort of compliance resources, both within INA, right? So that the compliance officers who are like looking on a daily basis at intelligence reports, there needs to be more capacity there, but we've also advocated to return to a previous rule under which the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties would review finished intel products from INA. I have to say we are still figuring out what we think should be the rule on raw intelligence products, which are very easily circulated and often are unreliable, but can really influence how the hundreds of law enforcement agencies who get them actually take action in response. I think that's a piece that I don't really have a full recommendation on right now. In terms of the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties and the Privacy Office, we think both need to have greater leadership backing. These offices have mandates. They were created because Congress realized that a department like DHS did have some serious CRCL risks, but the offices haven't been empowered. They haven't been able to really influence the course of things at DHS. So, and they're slightly different in terms of how they're structured and what their strengths and weaknesses are. But at bottom, we think that CRCL should be given more of a seat at the table at an early stage and should be allowed to report more transparently about the activities that it's doing and what it's seeing and what it's able to mitigate in the course of its work. And with the Privacy Office, I think our big concern with the Privacy Office is that they put out a lot of documents, but the documents don't really necessarily tell us what we need to know. DHS collects a huge amount of data about Americans, and former DHS officials have actually said that the civil liberties and civil privacy risks from DHS's collection of data rival those of the NSA, but it really doesn't get the same kind of attention. So given that level of risk, the privacy impact assessments and other documents that the Privacy Office issues do not allow for any understanding of what's actually going on in terms of the data. So one of our first recommendations is that the secretary should basically order a mapping of DHS's data holdings and the way they flow together. I think that's it. I mean, those are some of the principal ones.